The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Charles sat in his private study, staring at the medical reports scattered across his mahogany desk. The words seemed to blur together, but one phrase remained crystal clear: requires immediate treatment. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his teacup, the fine china rattling against the saucer. For months, he had ignored the persistent fatigue and the strange aches that seemed to settle deeper into his bones with each passing day. Royal duties had always demanded sacrifice, and he had assumed this was simply another test of his endurance. But the doctors had been insistent, their faces grave as they delivered news that would change everything. Down the hall, Kate was reviewing her schedule for the upcoming charity gala when her assistant knocked softly on the door. The young woman's expression was unusually somber, and Kate immediately sensed that something was wrong. She had developed an intuition about palace dynamics over the years, understanding when the atmosphere shifted from routine to crisis. Charles had specifically requested to speak with her privately, which was unusual given their typically formal interactions. As she made her way through the ornate corridors, Kate reflected on how much their relationship had evolved since her early days as a nervous newcomer to royal life. What had once been polite distance had gradually transformed into genuine mutual respect. The study door was slightly ajar when she arrived, and she could see Charles standing by the window, his silhouette framed against the afternoon light. His usually perfect posture seemed somehow diminished, and Kate felt a flutter of concern in her chest. She knocked gently and waited for his invitation to enter. When Charles turned to face her, Kate was struck by the vulnerability in his eyes. This was not the composed monarch she was accustomed to seeing, but rather a man grappling with something far beyond the usual pressures of royal duty. He gestured toward the chairs arranged near the fireplace, and they sat facing each other in the intimate setting. The conversation that followed would mark a turning point in their relationship. Charles spoke quietly about his diagnosis, his voice steady but his hands betraying his inner turmoil. He explained that the coming months would require a different kind of strength, not just from him but from the entire family. The monarchy would need to adapt, and he found himself looking to those he trusted most. Kate listened without interruption, her journalist instincts helping her process the gravity of what she was hearing. She thought about William, about their children, about the delicate balance they had all worked so hard to maintain. But mostly, she thought about the man sitting across from her, who had spent his entire life preparing for a role that now demanded more courage than he had ever imagined. As Charles finished speaking, a comfortable silence settled between them. Kate understood why he had chosen to confide in her first. Beyond her position in the family, she had proven herself to be someone who could handle crisis with grace and discretion. Her response in that moment would set the tone for everything that followed. She reached across the space between their chairs and gently placed her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it conveyed everything that words could not. In that touch, Charles felt the strength he had been seeking, the assurance that he would not face this challenge alone. Kate's quiet confidence became an anchor in the storm of uncertainty that surrounded them. The weight of what lay ahead seemed suddenly more manageable with this foundation of support. Charles realized that leadership sometimes meant knowing when to lean on others, and Kate represented the kind of steady presence that could help guide them all through the difficult times ahead. Outside the study windows, life in London continued its usual pace. Unaware that within the palace walls, a new chapter was beginning. It would be a chapter that would test every assumption about duty, family, and the true meaning of strength in the face of life's most challenging moments. The news traveled through the palace with the weight of a carefully guarded secret. Staff members who had served the royal family for decades found themselves moving with extra purpose, their usual efficiency now tinged with protective concern. In the private quarters, Camilla sat alone in her sitting room, the newspaper folded neatly on her lap. Though she had not turned a page in over an hour, she had always been a woman who faced challenges head-on. But this felt different. The public scrutiny that would inevitably follow, the speculation about Charles's condition, the endless commentary about the future of the monarchy, it all seemed to press down on her with suffocating intensity. For the first time in years, she questioned whether she had the strength to be the public figure this situation would demand. Camilla's phone buzzed with messages from friends and family, but she found herself unable to respond. Each well-meaning inquiry felt like another weight added to an already impossible burden. She had spent years building her confidence as Charles' partner, learning to navigate the complex world of royal duty, but nothing had prepared her for this. In contrast, Kate threw herself into action with characteristic determination. She rearranged her calendar, postponing personal commitments and shifting her focus entirely to supporting Charles and maintaining stability for the family. Her experience as a mother had taught her that sometimes the best way to help was simply to be present, offering practical support while others processed their emotions. The difference in their responses became apparent during the first family meeting to discuss the situation. Kate arrived with a notebook filled with questions about medical logistics, public relations strategies, and ways to maintain normal routines for the children. She spoke with clear purpose about how they could work together to ensure Charles felt supported while protecting the family's privacy. Camilla, meanwhile, sat quietly at the edge of the group, her usual animated presence noticeably subdued. When asked for her thoughts, she offered brief responses that suggested she was struggling to find her footing in this new reality. The confidence she had built over years of public appearances seemed to have evaporated overnight. Charles noticed the shift immediately. He had grown to depend on Camilla's steady presence and her ability to bring lightness to even the most serious situations. Her withdrawal left a void that he felt acutely, particularly when he needed emotional support most. But he also understood that everyone processed difficult news differently, and he chose to give her space while leaning more heavily on those who seemed better equipped to help. William watched the dynamics unfold with growing concern for his stepmother. He had witnessed her evolution from someone the public viewed with suspicion to a respected member of the royal family, and he worried about the impact of this crisis on her hard-earned confidence. But he also saw how naturally Kate stepped into the role of primary support, and he felt grateful for her strength. The media began to notice subtle changes in the royal family's public appearances. Camilla's engagements became less frequent, with vague explanations about scheduling conflicts. Meanwhile, Kate's presence became more prominent, appearing alongside Charles at events where Camilla might normally have been expected to join him. Palace staff adapted to these shifts with professional discretion, but privately they observed the changing dynamics with interest. Some had always been impressed by Kate's ability to balance warmth with dignity, and they now watched as she expanded that role to become a source of stability for the entire family. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Kate began arriving early to Charles's private meetings, offering to take notes or handle follow-up tasks. She made herself available for conversations that might previously have included Camilla, and Charles found himself increasingly turning to her for advice on both personal and official matters. As weeks passed, it became clear that this was not simply a temporary adjustment, but a fundamental shift in family roles. Kate's natural leadership abilities and her talent for remaining calm under pressure made her an ideal confidant during a time when Charles needed reliable support most. The irony was not lost on those who remembered the early years when Kate had been seen as an outsider, learning to navigate royal life. Now she had become the family member others looked to for guidance, while Camilla, once the experienced partner, found herself stepping back from responsibilities she had grown comfortable handling. The children sensed the change before anyone explained it to them. George, Charlotte, and Louis had developed the keen awareness that comes from growing up in a household where emotional undercurrents often carried more meaning than spoken words. They noticed that their grandfather seemed tired more often, that family gatherings had taken on a more serious tone, and that their mother spent longer hours on phone calls behind closed doors. Kate faced the delicate challenge of maintaining normalcy for her children while preparing them for the reality of their grandfather's illness. She chose her words carefully during their evening conversations, explaining that sometimes people get sick and need extra love and support, but that didn't mean they should worry or feel scared. Her calm approach helped the children process the information without becoming overwhelmed. Charles found unexpected comfort in these interactions with his grandchildren. Their innocent questions and unfiltered affection provided a welcome contrast to the careful conversations he had with adults who seemed to weigh every word. When Louis climbed onto his lap during a family tea and announced that he would help Grandpa feel better by sharing his favorite biscuits, Charles felt tears welling up in his eyes. Kate noticed these moments and began creating more opportunities for natural family interactions. She organized informal lunches where Charles could enjoy time with the children, Without the pressure of formal events, these gatherings became islands of peace in what had become an increasingly complex schedule of medical appointments and royal duties. The contrast with Camilla's response became more pronounced during these family moments. Where she had once been an enthusiastic participant in birthday celebrations and holiday traditions, she now often found excuses to step away or declined invitations altogether. Her absence was felt acutely by Charles, who had grown to value her perspective on family matters. Kate began filling this void naturally, stepping into conversations about upcoming events and family decisions. When Charles needed someone to discuss the children's school schedules or holiday plans, he found himself calling Kate rather than Camilla. These practical discussions gradually expanded to include more personal topics as Charles discovered that Kate was an excellent listener. During one particularly difficult week when Charles's treatment schedule was especially demanding, Kate surprised him by arriving at the hospital with a thermos of his favorite soup and a collection of letters the children had written. She sat quietly while he read each one, offering supportive silence when words seemed inadequate and gentle conversation when he wanted to talk. These hospital visits became a regular occurrence, with Kate coordinating with Charles's medical team to ensure she arrived at times when her presence would be most helpful. She developed relationships with the nursing staff and learned to navigate the complex logistics of providing support while maintaining security protocols and privacy. Camilla, meanwhile, found that even thinking about hospitals triggered her anxiety. The clinical atmosphere, the constant reminders of mortality, the way conversations revolved around symptoms and treatments. It all felt overwhelming to someone who preferred to focus on life's brighter aspects. Her coping mechanism was to immerse herself in other activities. But this only widened the gap between her and Charles during a time when he needed support most. The royal staff began to adjust their protocols to accommodate these new dynamics. Kate's security detail was increased to match her expanded role, and her personal assistant worked more closely with Charles's private secretary to coordinate schedules. Palace communications were subtly restructured to reflect Kate's more prominent position in family decision-making. William watched his wife take on these additional responsibilities with a mixture of pride and concern. He had always admired her strength, but he worried about the emotional toll of supporting his father while managing her own family's needs. Their private conversations revealed Kate's determination to be the steady presence Charles needed, even when she felt uncertain about the future. The transformation in family dynamics was perhaps most visible during official events. Where Charles and Camilla had once presented a united front, it was now Charles and Kate who seemed most in sync. They developed an easy communication style that allowed them to coordinate seamlessly during public appearances, with Kate intuitively understanding when Charles needed support and when he preferred to handle situations independently. Public observers began to notice that Kate's confidence had grown remarkably. The woman who had once seemed nervous about speaking in public now commanded attention naturally, her words carrying weight that came from knowing she had earned her family's trust during their most challenging time. The turning point came during a particularly challenging medical consultation, when Charles received news that his treatment would need to be more intensive than originally planned. The oncologist spoke in measured tones about adjusted schedules and enhanced protocols, but Charles heard only the underlying message that his recovery would be longer and more uncertain than anyone had hoped. Kate had accompanied him to this appointment, taking careful notes and asking practical questions that Charles found himself unable to voice. When the doctor stepped out to retrieve additional information, Charles sat in silence, staring at the clinical charts on the wall. The weight of leadership that he had carried for decades suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Without a word, Kate moved her chair closer to his and simply sat with him in the quiet room. She didn't offer false reassurances or try to fill the silence with optimistic predictions. Instead, she provided the kind of steady presence that allowed Charles to process his emotions without feeling judged or hurried. This moment of shared vulnerability deepened their bond in ways that formal family relationships rarely allowed. The drive back to the palace was equally quiet, but it was a comfortable silence that spoke to their growing understanding of each other. Kate had learned that Charles didn't always need words of encouragement. Sometimes he needed someone who could sit with uncertainty Without trying to fix everything immediately, this wisdom would prove invaluable in the months ahead. Meanwhile, Camilla's retreat from public life became more pronounced. She began declining invitations to events she had previously enjoyed, citing fatigue or scheduling conflicts. Friends, who had grown accustomed to her vivacious presence at social gatherings, noticed her absence and began to worry privately about her well-being. The contrast became most apparent during a state dinner that had been planned months in advance. Camilla's last-minute decision not to attend left palace staff scrambling to adjust seating arrangements and protocol. Kate stepped in gracefully, though she had not been prepared for such a formal role. Her natural diplomacy and genuine interest in the visiting dignitaries made the evening successful despite the last-minute changes. Charles felt Camilla's absence keenly during events like these. They had developed a partnership over the years that made public appearances feel manageable and even enjoyable. Her wit and social skills had complemented his more serious demeanor perfectly. Without her beside him, he felt exposed and uncertain about his ability to fulfill his public duties while managing his private health concerns. Kate recognized this challenge and began preparing more thoroughly for events where she might need to fill gaps left by Camilla's absence. She studied briefing materials more carefully, reached out to palace staff for additional background information, and practiced conversations that might help put foreign dignitaries at ease. Her dedication to these preparations impressed even the most experienced protocol officers. The palace staff, many of whom had served the royal family for decades, began to whisper about the shifting dynamics they observed daily. Kate's transformation from newcomer to trusted advisor had happened gradually, but her emergence as Charles's primary source of emotional support represented a significant change in family hierarchy. These changes were not lost on William, who found himself caught between concern for his stepmother and admiration for his wife's strength. During private moments, he expressed worry about the pressure Kate was taking on, but she assured him that supporting Charles felt like a natural extension of her family responsibilities, rather than an additional burden. The children adapted to their mother's increased involvement in their grandfather's care, with the resilience that characterizes youth. They began including Charles more deliberately in their daily activities, sharing school projects over video, calls when he couldn't visit in person, and creating artwork specifically designed to brighten his treatment room. Kate coordinated these family connections carefully, understanding that maintaining normal relationships with his grandchildren provided Charles with motivation and joy that medical treatments alone couldn't offer. She worked with teachers to arrange special presentations that Charles could attend virtually, and organized family game nights that accommodated his energy levels. As autumn approached, it became clear that the family's new configuration was not temporary, but represented a fundamental shift in relationships and responsibilities. Kate had evolved from daughter-in-law to confidant, from family member to emotional anchor. The role suited her natural strengths and her genuine care for Charles, but it also represented a level of responsibility she had never expected to shoulder. The transformation was perhaps most evident in how Charles spoke about family matters. Where he had once consulted primarily with Camilla about personal decisions, he now turned first to Kate. Her practical approach to problem-solving combined with her emotional intelligence made her an ideal advisor during a time when every decision felt weighted with unusual significance. The media began to notice the subtle but significant changes in royal family dynamics during the annual Commonwealth Day service. Photographers captured images of Kate walking closely beside Charles, their conversation appearing animated and comfortable, while Camilla followed several steps behind, with what observers described as a distant expression. These photographs sparked speculation in newspapers and online forums about the changing relationships within the royal family. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for years noted that Kate's body language suggested a new level of confidence and authority, while Camilla appeared uncharacteristically withdrawn from the center of activity. Kate was acutely aware of this increased scrutiny, but chose to focus on supporting Charles rather than managing public perception. She had learned early in her royal life that authenticity served her better than calculated appearances, and she applied this lesson to her expanded role. Her genuine concern for Charles's well-being came through in every interaction, making it difficult for critics to question her motives. Charles found strength in Kate's unwavering support, but he also struggled with guilt about the burden he was placing on her. During one of their regular afternoon conversations, he expressed concern that his needs were taking her away from her own children and responsibilities. Kate's response surprised him with its directness and warmth. She explained that supporting him felt like a natural extension of caring for her family, not an obligation or sacrifice. She reminded him that he had welcomed her into the royal family with kindness and patience when she was still learning her role, and that she wanted to offer the same support during his time of need. This conversation marked a shift in their relationship from one based on duty to one grounded in genuine affection. The impact of Camilla's withdrawal became more apparent during private family moments. Charles had grown accustomed to sharing the day's events with her over dinner, discussing both the trivial details and significant concerns that filled his schedule. Without these conversations, he felt isolated despite being surrounded by staff and family members. Kate began to fill this void by scheduling regular check-ins with Charles, sometimes over tea in his study and other times during walks through the palace gardens. These conversations covered everything from medical updates to concerns about the children's education, creating the kind of ongoing dialogue that Charles had been missing. Camilla's friends grew increasingly worried about her well-being as weeks passed without significant improvement in her mood or engagement. Some attempted to reach out with invitations for lunch or cultural events, but Camilla consistently declined, claiming she wasn't feeling social. Her isolation became a source of concern for those who had watched her flourish in her role as Charles's partner. The contrast in coping mechanisms became a topic of private discussion among palace staff. Kate's approach of increasing her involvement and taking on additional responsibilities stood in stark contrast to Camilla's retreat from activity and social connection. Neither approach was right or wrong, but the practical impact on Charles's daily life was unmistakable. During a particularly difficult week when Charles experienced side effects from his treatment that left him feeling weak and discouraged, Kate made the decision to temporarily move into guest quarters at the palace. This allowed her to be available for medical emergencies while maintaining her responsibilities to her own family. The arrangement worked better than anyone had expected. Kate's presence provided Charles with the reassurance that someone he trusted was nearby, while her children enjoyed the novelty of extended visits with their grandfather. William supported the decision completely, understanding that his wife's dedication to his father represented the kind of family loyalty that would define their legacy. These extended stays at the palace allowed Kate to observe the daily rhythms of royal life from a different perspective. She gained a deeper understanding of the constant pressures Charles faced and developed even greater appreciation for the strength required to maintain royal duties while managing personal health challenges. Camilla's absence from these intimate family moments was felt by everyone involved, but particularly by Charles, who had valued her insights and companionship during both ordinary and significant occasions. He began to worry about their relationship, and whether her withdrawal was temporary or represented a more permanent change in their partnership. The situation reached a crisis point when Camilla missed an important family birthday celebration, citing illness at the last minute. Charles's disappointment was evident to everyone present, and Kate found herself working harder to maintain the celebratory atmosphere despite the underlying tension. That evening, Kate and William had a serious conversation about the long-term implications of the current family dynamics. They discussed the possibility of encouraging Camilla to seek professional support for what appeared to be depression or anxiety related to Charles's illness, while also acknowledging that they could only control their own responses to the situation. Spring brought the first signs of hope that Charles's treatment was succeeding. His energy levels improved noticeably, and medical appointments began to carry more positive news than negative. During one particularly encouraging consultation, the oncologist used the word remission for the first time, causing both Charles and Kate to exchange looks of cautious optimism. Kate had become Charles's regular companion at these medical appointments, taking detailed notes and asking follow-up questions that helped them both understand the complex information. Her presence had evolved from emotional support to practical partnership, and Charles realized how much he had come to depend on her clear thinking during stressful situations. The improvement in Charles's condition created an opportunity to address the elephant in the room: Camilla's continued withdrawal from family life. Charles knew that ignoring the situation would not make it resolve naturally, and he worried that permanent damage was being done to their relationship while they waited for her to feel ready to re-engage. Kate suggested that they approach the situation with the same directness that had characterized their own relationship. Rather than making assumptions about Camilla's feelings or motivations, Charles could simply ask what kind of support she needed and whether there was anything specific that was preventing her from participating in family activities. The conversation between Charles and Camilla took place in the garden on a warm afternoon, when Charles was feeling particularly strong. He began by acknowledging that everyone had responded differently to his illness, and that he didn't expect Camilla to handle the situation exactly as others had. But he also expressed how much he missed her presence and wondered if there was anything he could do to help her feel more comfortable. Camilla's response revealed the depth of her struggle with anxiety about loss and mortality. She explained that watching someone she loved face a life-threatening illness brought back memories of previous losses that she thought she had processed. The fear of losing Charles felt overwhelming, and her coping mechanism had been to distance herself emotionally as a form of self-protection. Charles listened without judgment, understanding for the first time that Camilla's withdrawal had been motivated by love rather than indifference. Her fear of loss had paralyzed her ability to be present during the very time when their relationship could have provided mutual comfort. This realization helped him approach her situation with compassion rather than frustration. Together, they developed a plan for Camilla to gradually re-engage with family activities, while also seeking professional support for her anxiety. Charles assured her that there was no pressure to immediately return to her previous level of involvement, but that he wanted her to know she was welcomed and needed whenever she felt ready. Kate played a crucial role in facilitating Camilla's return to family life. She made space for Camilla in conversations and activities without making her feel like an outsider who was being welcomed back after an absence. Kate's natural diplomacy helped smooth potentially awkward transitions and demonstrated that supporting Charles didn't require competition between the women in his life. The first family dinner with Camilla's full participation in months felt tentative but hopeful. Charles was careful not to overwhelm her with attention or make her feel like her absence had been a topic of discussion. Instead, he included her naturally in conversations about upcoming events and family plans, signaling that her input was valued and expected. Kate observed these interactions with relief, understanding that Charles's happiness was enhanced by having both sources of support, rather than relying entirely on her. She had never wanted to replace Camilla in Charles's life, but had simply filled a void during a crisis. Now she could see a path forward that honored everyone's contributions and needs. The children were particularly delighted to have their step-grandmother back at family gatherings. They had missed her playful energy and her different perspective on their activities and interests. Camilla's return to form with the children signaled that her healing process was genuine and sustainable. As summer approached, the family found a new rhythm that incorporated lessons learned during the crisis. Charles continued to value Kate's practical support and clear thinking, while also rebuilding his emotional connection with Camilla. The experience had taught them all that family relationships could evolve and strengthen through challenges rather than simply surviving them. Kate's role as primary support during Charles's darkest months had established a permanent foundation of trust and affection between them. This relationship would continue to be a source of strength for Charles, while also enriching Kate's understanding of royal duty and family loyalty. The crisis had tested everyone's assumptions about their relationships and revealed strengths they didn't know they possessed. Charles discovered that accepting help didn't diminish his authority but actually enhanced his ability to lead with wisdom and humility. By the time autumn returned, Charles had been declared in complete remission, and the family had settled into a new normal that felt both familiar and transformed. The crisis had fundamentally changed their relationships, but in ways that ultimately made them stronger and more authentic than before. Kate's evolution during this period had been remarkable to witness. She had grown from someone who sought guidance about royal protocol to someone who could provide wisdom and support during the family's most challenging time. Her natural leadership abilities had emerged fully, and she now carried herself with a confidence that came from knowing she had earned her place through dedication rather than simply inheritance. Charles found that his relationship with Kate had developed into something unique. Within the family structure, she was no longer just William's wife or the children's mother, but had become a trusted advisor and emotional anchor in her own right. Their shared experience during his illness had created a bond that would endure long after the medical crisis had passed. The public had also noticed these changes, though they understood only the surface of what had occurred within the family. Kate's increased prominence at royal events was interpreted as natural progression in her role, while Camilla's temporary reduction in public appearances was attributed to personal choice rather than emotional struggle. Camilla's journey back to full engagement had taught everyone valuable lessons about supporting family members through different types of challenges. Her eventual return to public life was marked by a depth and authenticity that suggested the experience had ultimately strengthened rather than weakened her. She spoke more openly about mental health awareness and the importance of seeking support during difficult times. The relationship between Kate and Camilla had also evolved in unexpected ways. What could have become a source of tension or competition had instead developed into mutual respect and understanding. They had learned that supporting Charles didn't require them to approach the situation identically, and that their different strengths could complement rather than conflict with each other. Charles reflected often on how the crisis had revealed the true character of everyone around him. Kate's immediate response to step forward when support was needed had confirmed his initial instincts about her strength and loyalty. Camilla's eventual honesty about her struggles had deepened their relationship by removing pretense and allowing for genuine vulnerability. The children had also been changed by the experience, gaining a more mature understanding of family loyalty and the importance of supporting each other through difficult times. They had watched their mother take on additional responsibilities with grace and had learned that strength sometimes meant asking for help rather than trying to handle everything alone. Palace staff had observed these transformations with professional interest and personal investment. Many had served the royal family for decades and had rarely witnessed such significant shifts in family dynamics, handled with such dignity and mutual respect. The experience had reinforced their belief in the family's fundamental values, while also revealing new dimensions of character they hadn't previously seen. As Charles resumed his full schedule of royal duties, he carried with him a different perspective on leadership and vulnerability. The illness had taught him that strength could be demonstrated through accepting support, rather than always providing it, and that admitting uncertainty could actually enhance rather than diminish his authority. Kate continued to play an expanded role in family decision-making, but now it felt natural rather than emergency-driven. Her insights were sought on matters ranging from family celebrations to official engagements, and her opinion carried weight that reflected her proven judgment during crisis situations. The family's Christmas celebration that year felt particularly meaningful, as it marked not just Charles's recovery but also their collective growth through adversity. The conversations around the dinner table reflected a deeper level of honesty and connection than had existed before the crisis, and everyone present understood that they had emerged from a difficult period stronger than they had entered it. Looking toward the future, Charles felt confident that his family was prepared for whatever challenges might arise. The experience had tested their relationships and revealed resources of strength and support that he could rely on. Kate's emergence as a pillar of family stability ensured that the monarchy would continue to have the emotional foundation necessary to serve effectively. The story of this difficult year would remain largely private, known in its full detail only to those who had lived through it, but its impact would be felt for generations in the stronger relationships, deeper understanding, and proven resilience that had emerged from facing life's greatest challenges together as a family.